Jeff Jenkins with Metro News' Shauna Johnson and Harvey Payton, our legal analysts on the Don Blankenship criminal trial, and we have a verdict on this Thursday, December 3rd. It came down just after noon today, and Shauna, we have a split verdict against Don Blankenship.
It's a split verdict, Jeff. Guilty on count one, and specifically what that count is a conspiracy charge. That's a misdemeanor. Maximum penalty 1 year in prison. Not guilty on the second count, dealing with lying to securities officials. Not guilty on count three, lying to investors. And U.S. Attorney Booth Goodwin saying today he's not disappointed at all. He says they came in for a conviction and he considers this justice.
Okay, so you were in the courtroom, and give me, what was the reaction? Those in the courtroom were warned by Judge Berger not to react, but what was the reaction?
The family members who've been sitting in the front row since day one, they were crying before the jury even came back in. And I don't know that there were no outbursts or anything like that. There was no response from Blankenship himself, but you almost felt a bit of a release, at least for those family members at that moment in the courtroom. But it was really brief. Right. After 10 days of waiting, after more than 2 months of this trial that started on October 1st, 27 witnesses over 24 days, the reading of the verdict happened very, very quickly.
Harvey, you've heard the evidence along with me and Shauna all the way through this trial. When you consider what the jury did and considering the evidence, they may have reached the exact verdict that a lot of people would have.
Right. I think this verdict is clearly sustainable, justifiable, and it is the one group of findings that is completely justified by the evidence. Now, we spoke when the evidence concluded that the strong point of the government's case was the testimony of the miners who talked about the conditions on the mine face, about ventilation and dust control, and that to relate that conspiracy to Mr. Blankenship, the jury would have to conclude that that sort of conduct could not go on as it did, as long as it did, unless, quote, he was in on it. And that's what the jury concluded. They found him guilty of conspiring to willfully violate the law, a law, ventilation and dust control. They acquitted him of conspiracy to interfere with the government's enforcement of the law, and that's because I believe the jury accepted the defense position that advance warning to the underground miners of the presence of inspectors has gone on forever at this mine and at other mines, and it's sort of a part of the ingrained culture of underground mining, right or wrong. And the securities counts, who's to say what the words strive and condone mean, because this jury had to find what they meant in Don Blankenship's mind when he didn't write them, but he didn't edit them out. Right. Well, they obviously had trouble defining those terms, and therefore how could they find him guilty? So it appears to me that it's clearly sustainable. It is the one verdict, looking at all the evidence in the case, that you think would be the most sustainable on appeal and the most justifiable under this evidence.
Shauna, as far as UBB families go, they have said all along they wanted a conviction. They wanted justice done. And I think for them to have him convicted on conspiracy, although it carries the least amount of time, the misdemeanor, I think for them, they have satisfaction that, no, he's been convicted in connection with their family members.
Well, we heard Dr. Judy Jones-Peterson, whose brother Dean Jones was killed at UBB. She told us she just wanted somebody to say Don Blankenship was guilty. And that's what somebody did today, 12 members of a jury who sat here for months and listened to testimony. Talking to a couple other family members, they're not so fully satisfied. They say that, they're wondering what the jury heard when they heard enough in their minds to convict him on all of the charges. And we know count three carried the greatest sentence, up to 20 years if he'd been convicted on that. I think that's what they were hoping for, at least some of them. You can't speak for all of these people. They all have different experiences, lost different loved ones. They've gone through the past 5 years in different ways. So we're getting a little bit of a differing opinions, but you have to understand that from what they've been through.
All right, continue to follow the reaction from today's verdict. Don Blankenship convicted of a conspiracy charge, found not guilty on 2 fraud charges. For Shauna Johnson and Harvey Payton, I'm Jeff Jenkins, WVMetroNews.com.